I never thought the one who would ruin my daughter's life would be the man she called her husband for 3 long years. I also never expected that one winter night he would sneak into my room, rummaging through it, trying to crack open the safe to find evidence that, unbeknownst to him, would be the verdict that ended his marriage. I had silently watched his every move, every lie, every shady bank transaction, and set up a trap so that when he opened the safe, it was already too late. I woke to a faint sound, not loud enough for anyone else to notice, but enough to pull me from the light sleep of an old man who'd survived war and heart attacks. The room was pitch black, save for the faint green glow of the digital clock by the bed. 3:12 a.m. I didn't move. Not at all. My breathing steadied like an old reflex, and in the lingering silence I heard the creak of a hinge, the nightstand drawer. Someone's hand was searching through pill bottles, an old watch and papers I hadn't thrown out. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Those footsteps, that gait, the cheap cologne mixed with the smell of vape smoke. Damon, my daughter's husband. I heard him move lightly around the head of the bed, breathing fast like he was counting seconds. This house is so quiet. Every sound rings like a drum. I stayed still, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling, hands resting under the heavy blanket. He thought I was asleep. He thought I didn't know. My eyes flicked to the right, where the old safe sat inside the wardrobe, the safe I'd said I no longer used. I remembered how, a few weeks ago at dinner, he asked, "Where do you keep important papers, Dad? Lots of thieves around these days." I just smiled, shrugged. In my head, I said, "Where else?" He laughed then, but not like me. His laugh was short, crooked, without a hint of warmth. In the darkness, I heard the clink of metal keys. He was searching the sewing box. My eyes blinked once, not from sleep but from pain. That box belonged to Maria, my wife. He didn't know, or didn't care. Everything in this house he treated as his own. I stayed still, unmoving. I wanted to know what he'd do next. Outside, the maple tree shed leaves through the slightly open window, soft rustles mixing with the steady beat of my heart. Damon let out a breath, barely audible, like he'd found what he needed. Then I heard his footsteps leave the room. Light, hurried, almost rushed. I waited 1 minute, 2, nothing more. I sat up, slowly. The darkness still enveloped me, but I was fully awake. I didn't need a light. I've lived in this house for nearly 40 years. I know every creak of the floor, every crack in the ceiling, every shadow cast not by light, but by lost trust. As I slipped on my old sweater, stepping out of the room with aching feet and an ice-cold mind, I realized one undeniable truth. Damon wasn't just a bad husband. He was a man trying to take what wasn't his. And this time I wouldn't let it slide. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and comment where you're watching from. Let me know what time it is where you are. I went down the stairs slowly, without turning on the light, without making a sound. The house was so still I could hear the ticking of the wall clock in the dining room, and the faint hiss of the furnace adjusting half a degree. A dim light spilled from under the kitchen door, the fridge left slightly ajar. Damon was down there. I stopped at the last step, hidden in the dark. From my angle, I could only see his back standing by the fridge, holding a can of soda, but his eyes were fixed on the study at the end of the hall. He didn't know I was watching. He also didn't know I'd reset the thin thread on the study's door handle, or placed a slip of paper in the safe seam. He lingered by the fridge a few seconds, then slammed it shut. His footsteps echoed down the hall, stopping at the study door. Silence. No sound of the door opening. I knew he was checking the hinges, the gap, the lock I'd replaced last week. Finally, he went back to the kitchen, poured water into a glass, and sat at the island. I retreated, climbing the stairs in the dark like a ghost. My bedroom door closed silently. I sat on the edge of the bed, my back still stiff from fitful sleep. My mind raced, not from age but from piecing together a picture I no longer doubted. Damon wasn't just a freeloader, he was planning something bigger. It started a month ago. I came home one Tuesday afternoon to find him in my study. The door was ajar, and he was hunched over the desk, reading something. When I walked in, he jumped, quickly standing. "You startled me, Dad," he said, chuckling. "Just looking for the stapler." The stapler was never kept there. I didn't say anything, just gave a faint smile and checked the drawer as soon as he left. My life insurance file was out of place. The deed reissue form I'd carefully clipped was now misaligned in its plastic sleeve. I didn't speak up. I just started watching. At dinner, Damon brought up end-of-life planning and retirement finances. He asked if I'd considered transferring assets to Emily to avoid inheritance taxes. I played dumb, asking, "What taxes?" He smiled, backpedaling. "Oh, nothing, just curious. A friend's dealing with his mom's paperwork. It's a mess." I nodded. Inside, I laughed quietly. I'd been a financial advisor for nearly 25 years before retiring. Questions like that were like a blind man asking for directions to a gold vault he was never invited to. I let things unfold. I taped my notebook shut with clear tape, repositioned the printer to block the safe, and used thin marker ink to seal the edge of a file. I logged every day he was home alone, every probing question, every time he tried to cozy up to me to pry about money. One evening, pretending to nap in the living room, I overheard him on the phone in the kitchen. His voice was low, urgent, close enough for me to catch words like, "There's definitely something. The old man's not dumb, but he's getting senile, and we need to move before it's too late." I didn't need more proof, but proof kept coming. An old bank contact called me. They'd received a withdrawal request for a savings account I'd opened in my name 10 years ago, sent by fax with a forged signature and Emily's phone number. I froze, but when I compared the handwriting, I knew it wasn't Emily. It was Damon. He was setting up every financial escape route, like a fox slipping through every crack. What he didn't know was that this fox had wandered into the forest of an old wolf, and wolves don't sleep when they're being stalked. From that day, I locked away all real documents and left only fake copies. I checked the home cameras, changed the Wi-Fi password, and added a motion sensor to the study cabinet. No police, no noise, no rush, just preparation, silence, and a storm brewing. One only I knew exactly when would strike, because I'd seen all the signs, and tonight Damon had officially crossed a line he never should have. I've always believed smart people don't ask stupid questions unless they have a purpose. Damon knew I had a safe. He'd seen it. He'd stood before it that night, thinking I was asleep, when he rifled through drawers and slipped the spare key from Maria's sewing box. And after that night, the questions started. Not in a rush, not eagerly, but scattered like drops of water hitting the same spot on the floor until it rots. "Dad," he began one afternoon as we sat on the back porch, Emily watering the lavender bushes. "Remember that burglary at Mr. Stan's, the neighbor, last month?" I didn't turn, just nodded slightly. "Heard they got into the garage, cracked the safe, took everything valuable," he went on. "Do you use a safe? I mean, if you've got important stuff, maybe keep it somewhere safer." I set my teacup on the table, wiping each finger slowly with a napkin. "My most valuable asset now is my memory. No safe can hold that." Damon laughed, but his lips tightened. His eyes didn't join in. Later, he spoke again, quieter. "I think we should upgrade the house's security. Maybe install cameras, or at least change the safe's code, in case someone guesses it." I turned to him, looking straight. "Are you trying to guess my code, Damon?" He burst out laughing, trying to make it light. A joke. "No way. Just thinking ahead. You know, these days anyone can get scammed." I said nothing more. But that night, I changed the code, and the hiding spot for the spare key. Not in the sewing box, not in the drawer, but somewhere no one would think of, inside an old residential electrical manual, where only I knew a hollow had been carefully cut between pages 113 and 114 from my days as a repairman. The next morning, Damon offered to help organize my study. "It's like a museum display. You should freshen it up." I shook my head. "I like dust. Dust tells you what's been touched." My answer silenced him for nearly 2 days. But Damon wasn't one to give up. He switched to a new approach. Friendlier, softer, like he suddenly cared about bonding. He invited me for a beer, asked what I thought about the gold market, whether I'd pick real estate or stocks. He emphasized words like reserves, long-term assets, emergencies. Another time, he asked about birth certificates, property deeds, Maria's life insurance. "Just thinking, if something happens, you should keep things easy to find," he said, his concern so fake I nearly laughed. I asked back, "What's something supposed to mean?" He faltered, then said, "I mean, you're getting older. No one escapes that." "I can dodge death better than you dodge debts, Damon," I said, eyes fixed on my laptop. I saw him stare at me for a few seconds before walking away. I pretended not to notice, but every question was a step closer to his real intent. The problem was, I didn't know what he was after. Cash? Maria left nothing but her wedding ring, now in a desk drawer, or documents, things he shouldn't know about, but somehow he suspected existed, and they did exist. I kept the latest copy of my will, the transfer deed for shares in a small company I'd invested in, an old life insurance contract I'd once meant for Emily but withdrew after Damon showed up. All in the safe. But there was something else, a copy of a confession from someone who'd shaken our family years ago, known only to me and my lawyer, if that fell into the wrong hands. I didn't think Damon knew about that secret, but he definitely smelled something valuable. One rainy afternoon, he sat next to me in the living room, waiting for Emily to return from the store. "What do you think about naming family as the main beneficiary for insurance?" he asked. I didn't look at him. I stood, adjusted Emily and Damon's wedding photo on the shelf. The picture was taken in a white church, Damon smiling brightly, Emily resting her head on his shoulder. I took the frame down, wiped off a thin layer of dust, and placed it in a drawer. "I think," I said, closing the drawer, "you should only leave assets to someone who deserves them." I turned back. And someone who deserves them never needs to ask about a safe. Damon looked at me, no longer smiling. For the first time since marrying Emily, he didn't know how to respond, and that silence, raw, unscripted, was the clearest answer of all. I knew he'd return to the safe. It was only a matter of when. He was the type who couldn't let go of the feeling of almost touching a secret. His questions about codes, the old safe, or documents were just the prelude. He needed to be sure what he was chasing was worth it, and that night, he decided to take the gamble. I heard his footsteps at 2:17 a.m. The house was already quiet, but the special quiet of old houses, every step on oak floors was a warning. I didn't turn on the light, just sat still on the bed, like the night before. My bedroom door was cracked just enough to see the hallway through the mirror. Damon's tall, lanky shadow moved slowly, but no longer tiptoeing. He was certain I didn't know, that I was asleep, that the old man was past his prime. I heard the study door click open, a faint sound like teeth grinding. He stepped inside, then closed the door. As expected, I stood. My sweater was already on. The mini camera on the bookshelf's spine had auto-triggered when the motion sensor detected him. I wasn't in a hurry. He'd need a few minutes to realize the safe now had an electronic keypad, and he'd tear through every drawer looking for the old key, the one I'd placed in the electrical manual, page 114, after hollowing it out 3 weeks ago. I moved to the study door, silent. From the gap under the door, I saw the desk lamp's light spill onto the wooden floor. He was in there. He was opening the safe. I heard the beeps of the keypad, a few desperate clicks. Wrong. He was trying combinations, guessing. I knew he wouldn't get in with the code. He'd have to find the key. And when he started looking, he'd look in the wrong places first. The old sewing box, empty. The desk drawer where I'd once kept the savings book, empty. And finally, like a rat chasing breadcrumbs, he'd reach the bookshelf, the black leather-bound manual. I heard him pull the book, flip it, a soft snap, a sharp breath. I didn't see his face, but I bet his eyes lit up like he'd struck gold. The key was in his hand. I heard his steps gather at the safe, the sound of the lock turning, a triumphant click, silence. I inched closer, ear to the door. The silence stretched. He was looking. He didn't expect this. I knew what he saw wasn't what he wanted. No cash, no savings book, no gold chains, no stocks, no stacks of bills like in the movies. Just a thick envelope labeled Emily. Only open when a man betrays you. Next to it, a stack of single-sided A4 papers, bank statements, color-printed photos, debt records, Damon's name. He was holding it. I heard the papers flip. His breathing quickened, a muffled curse, then a louder shit, as if he'd been slapped. I slipped back to my room, fast enough not to be seen, quiet enough to leave no trace. I closed the door, locked it lightly, lay back down like I'd never stirred. Eyes still open. I heard the study door swing open. He was rattled now. His steps weren't steady anymore, but heavy stomps. He climbed the stairs, then stood outside my room for a moment. No knock, just standing. I could feel his presence through the wood, through the crack, through the unease seeping from his every pore, but I didn't move. Then he left. I heard his bedroom door slam. Soon after, the sound of running water. He was washing his face, washing away the panic. But he couldn't wash away the fear. The next morning, he sat at breakfast like always, but his hands trembled slightly. Emily didn't notice. She was talking about a new project, a new boss, a business trip. I just nodded, occasionally glancing at Damon. His eyes avoided mine. His back was rigid. He wasn't the Damon of weeks past. Confident, smiling, asking questions, playing friendly. Now he was a Damon who knew his secret had been flipped, knew he'd been watched, knew the safe wasn't just an object. It was a trap, and he'd put his own neck in it. But what Damon didn't know was that I hadn't taken the originals from the safe. I left everything there for him to see, for him to know, for him to wonder, if he showed me this, what else is he holding back? That question would haunt him for nights to come. And that was just the beginning. But last night, when he opened the safe, everything changed. Not for me, for him. Because from that moment, I was no longer just the old father-in-law living under the same roof. I was the one holding the lever. And Damon knew that lever was aimed straight at his marriage. Inside that safe, I didn't keep money, nor jewelry, stocks, gold, or anything a greedy man could pin a dollar value to. What I kept inside was the truth. Raw, cold, undeniable. And Damon had seen it. Page by page, proof by proof, bank statements from 4 separate accounts in his name. One frozen for suspected money laundering. Another receiving regular transfers from unclear sources over the past 3 years. It took me 6 months to gather it all. Not because I wanted to track him from the start, but because he'd put himself in my crosshairs the moment he stepped through my door with that too bright red tie and too perfect smile. Loan contracts under fake names but tied to my home address. A copy of a mortgage for a small apartment he'd bought with a woman named Lauren in Santa Clara, where he claimed to be on a business trip for 6 weeks last fall. And most damning, a set of color-printed photos, crystal clear, showing him leaving the Marriott Hotel with her in November. The same day, Emily threw their second anniversary party, and he showed up 3 hours late, blaming traffic, all neatly packed in an envelope labeled Emily, my handwriting shaky but deliberate, sealed with 2 layers of tape. I wasn't sure if he'd opened it last night, but just seeing it was enough to shake him. I wanted him to know that everything he thought he'd hidden, I knew. And I didn't need to yell, confront, or slam the table like hot-headed fathers do. I just needed him to open the safe. I just needed the truth to speak for me. When I entered the study the next morning, the safe was still locked, but the dial was off by a few degrees, and smudged fingerprints marred the stainless steel. I didn't wipe them off. I left them. On the desk was something that wasn't mine, a small handwritten note, folded in quarters, placed neatly. I opened it. The shaky writing read, "Dad, I'm sorry if I did anything to upset you. I'm just trying to secure Emily's future. I hope you understand." No signature, no name, but I didn't need one. I folded the note, tucked it into the bottom drawer. No response, not a word. I just watched. That evening, Damon avoided me. At dinner, he ate quickly, eyes glued to his plate like a kid awaiting a scolding for a bad grade. Emily noticed nothing, chattering about a difficult client and lighting designs for a Nordic-style restaurant. I ate my soup quietly, spoonful by spoonful. Each faint clink of the spoon against the bowl was like a bell tolling on Damon's nerves. He was waiting for me to say something, a word, a warning, a threat, but I stayed silent, and that silence kept him awake. I knew because 3 nights later, I heard his bedroom door open at 1 a.m., footsteps, the faucet turning on, then off, again, like he was just standing there wondering what to do next. But there was nothing for him to do, no way to erase what he'd seen. He didn't know I'd given the originals to my lawyer a week ago, with instructions. If anything happens to me, give it all to Emily. I didn't need police. I didn't need courts. I just needed Emily to know the truth. And now, Damon knew that day could come any moment. He started acting differently, overly kind, buying Emily flowers for no reason, wiping down the kitchen though he'd never lifted a finger before, smiling more, telling old stories, reminiscing about family memories he was never truly part of. But I saw the tension in every move. He began checking his phone constantly. Once I saw him sit in his car for nearly 20 minutes after getting home, not coming inside, just sitting there, staring at the house, as if debating whether to drive off for good. One Saturday afternoon when Emily was at work, he came into the study while I was reading the paper. "Dad," he started, voice low, "I think we need to talk." I folded the paper, set it down. "About what?" He hesitated a second. "About that night." I looked straight into his eyes. "What night?" He swallowed. "The night I went into the study. I know you saw." I didn't nod, didn't shake my head. I just let him drown in his own silence. He exhaled heavily. I didn't mean any harm. I just thought if there was something important, I should know to protect Emily." I tilted my head. "And you thought the best way to protect your wife was to sneak into your father-in-law's safe in the middle of the night?" He didn't answer, just looked at his hands. I went on, voice flat like reading a prescription. "What did you see in there, Damon?" He didn't respond right away. He just said softly, "Enough to know I went too far." I stood, walked to the door. "Good, because from now on you won't have to go any further. You just have to stand still and wait." He looked up. "Wait for what?" I smiled. "Consequences." Then I left the room. The door closed behind me without a sound. But I knew for Damon that sound was louder than any judgment. And in his heart, fear had begun to creep in like cold fog on the first winter night of an inescapable frost. The next morning, Damon came down to the kitchen in a charcoal sweatshirt, hair slicked neater than usual, his face so forced it was fake. He said good morning with a brighter tone than normal, grabbing a box of cereal like everything was the same, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't stood in my study less than 10 hours ago, admitting he'd sneaked into the safe and seen everything. I was washing my coffee mug, hands in warm water, back to him, but I didn't need to look to know where his eyes were. My back, the old ceramic mug I'd used since Maria passed, and the corner of the table where I usually left my car keys. I didn't react, didn't turn. I kept wiping the mug, set it on the rack, then pulled out a chair to sit across from the morning paper. Emily walked in, smiling at both men, oblivious to anything off. "Sleep well?" she asked Damon, brushing her damp, blow-dried hair. "Yeah, great," he replied, eyes flicking to me briefly. "You, Dad? Sleep okay?" I folded the paper, looked up. "Great," I said slowly. "Never slept better." A simple statement, but Damon flinched slightly. I saw it. He smiled to cover it, but eyes don't lie. His pupils shrank, eyelids twitched. He was waiting for my move, but I did nothing. I sipped my water, then shifted the topic to the maple tree out front, shedding leaves earlier than usual. Emily chimed in. Damon nodded along, quieter than he spoke. Over the next few days, he changed completely. He woke earlier, mowed the lawn, though I never asked, offered to clean the garage, drive me to the store, fix the shed door's hinge, things he'd never noticed before. He was trying to make up, bit by bit. But every action was heavy, awkward, like someone scrubbing ink off white paper only to find it's bled through 3 layers. He thought he could hide, thought if he was nice enough, long enough, I'd believe what I saw in the safe was a misunderstanding. But I didn't misunderstand, and I wouldn't forget. Every time he looked at me, I saw the probing glance. He was trying to guess. What would I say? Would I tell Emily? What would I do with those papers? But my silence unnerved him most. I didn't mention the safe, didn't mention the envelope, didn't mention the photos. I let them drift like they never existed, but I knew he remembered every detail. One evening, I caught him standing outside the study door as I came out of the bathroom. He jumped, gave an awkward smile. Oh, I was going to ask, need the light bulb changed? It seems dim. I looked at him, silent for a moment. No need, I said. Darkness is good. People see each other's true colors better without too much light. Then I walked to my room, leaving him frozen. The next few days, Damon barely mentioned the safe, finances, insurance, or anything money-related. He avoided any talk that could lead to the truth. But Emily didn't. One Friday evening, when Damon went to get the car, Emily stayed with me in the living room. Dad, she said, voice soft as a breath. Are you and Damon okay lately? I wasn't surprised. My daughter's not dumb. She sensed something off. I smiled, shook my head. Fine. Why do you ask? I don't know. It feels like you two are on guard. I sighed, staring at Maria's photo on the shelf. Sometimes, when people think something important's about to be taken, they build walls instead of telling the truth. Emily went quiet. She didn't ask more. I didn't say more. Because it wasn't time yet. Damon came back in, holding a takeout bag, laughing loudly to fill the silence. Pizza time, he said, voice brighter than usual. Emily stood, acting like nothing happened. I lingered a moment, then joined them at the table. He sat across from me, serving pizza, pouring water, asking if I wanted extra cheese. I nodded. He beamed like it was a victory. But he didn't know this wasn't a battle. It was a play, and I was the playwright. As he took his first bite, I looked straight into his eyes, said nothing, just looked, long, slow, long enough to make him choke. Too spicy, he coughed softly. Got me. I smiled. Careful. Some things hotter than that are waiting. Then I kept eating. No one spoke again until the meal ended, but I knew Damon wouldn't sleep well tonight, and that's what I wanted. I didn't need to threaten him with words. I just needed him to wear a mask every day, until he no longer knew what was real or fake. And when that mask falls, no one but me will pull the final curtain. I started turning the tables one Monday morning, when Damon drove Emily to work, thinking I was home just watering plants, reading the paper, or dozing off in front of the TV like any old man. He didn't know that for weeks I'd been reconnecting with old contacts, former colleagues, a few peers from my legal accounting days, and especially Hank Lerner, a retired credit investigator from an audit firm in Denver, now living an hour's drive from me. Hank was the first I thought of when I decided I needed to know Damon's past, not through stories but in black and white documents. You digging into your son-in-law? Hank asked over the phone, voice as gravelly as ever. Not exactly, I replied. I just need to know if what I suspect is old man's intuition or plain truth. Hank chuckled. If you're still this sharp, you're awake enough to hear some hard-to-swallow stuff. 3 days later, we met at a small bakery in Littleton. Hank was the same, big belly, checkered shirt, clutching a black coffee like motor oil. I brought copies of the papers from the safe ones Damon had printed and tried to hide. Hank read each page, silent. At page 8, he looked up at me. This guy's not simple. At least 2 credit profiles under fake names. Same social security number, different addresses, different jobs. One was shut down for fraud tied to consumer loans. I gripped the chair's armrest lightly. Can you trace it? Of course, Hank said. I've still got tools, but the kicker is, he slid a separate sheet to me. This is the real time bomb. I looked down. A credit report entry. Collateral asset. 1 property in Santa Clara, CA. Under Damon Stroud and Lauren M. Whitaker. I read it twice. Lauren Whitaker. The name from the photo. The woman with Damon leaving the Marriott. He's living a double life? I asked. Hank nodded. And not just double, maybe triple. There's regular money transfers to a 90DW trust account, a personal trust. No Emily in it, nothing in my daughter's name, not a cent. I leaned back, closed my eyes for a few seconds. The anger in me didn't flare. It didn't need to. It was ripe, like a wound that doesn't bleed but festers quietly. Anything else? I asked. Hank glanced at me, then set another thin file on the table. Here's the latest financials, 2 weeks ago. A $5,000 withdrawal from Lauren's account moved to Damon's. Then Damon funneled it to an investment firm, WealthRamp Solutions. Never heard of it. Doesn't exist. It's a shell, a paper company, set up to launder money or hide origins. Hank's eyes darkened. I've seen this before. He's prepping to bail, gathering cash, splitting it off, and vanishing before anyone catches on. I stared at the papers like a self-writing indictment. Every number, every line, every name was a slash across the mask Damon had worn for 3 years. He wasn't some naive guy caught in trouble. He was the architect of a web of lies, and Emily was just a link. We parted after coffee. Hank shook my hand firmly. I'm not telling you what to do, but if it were me, I'd act soon. Social media needs one post to ruin a career. But this, he tapped the file. This can ruin a life. I drove home with the file on the passenger seat, silent the whole way. Damon was in the backyard when I got back, wiping down the wooden porch chairs. He looked up, smiled like nothing was wrong. I nodded, said nothing. I went to the study, locked the door, placed the file next to the old Emily envelope in the safe. I added a copy to it, not for Emily, for the police. Caution never hurts. That night I sat in the living room, looking through the window at the pitch-black backyard. I heard Damon on the phone, faint, in his bedroom. I didn't need to strain to know he was lying, with the same familiar voice he used on me. But now it was the voice of a man about to lose everything. I picked up my teacup, set it on the table, the cup Maria used every evening. I looked at the empty spot where her rocking chair used to be. If she were alive, what would she say? Maybe she'd tell me to forgive. Maybe she'd urge me to talk to Emily. Or maybe she'd say, don't let our daughter take another step toward a hell she doesn't even see. I gripped the handle lightly, and I knew there was no turning back. I wouldn't sound the alarm. I wouldn't issue warnings. I'd keep silent. Let Damon pave his own path until he crashes into the wall he built himself. But this time, I laid every brick, and he was the one carrying the mortar. I spent the next morning at the dining table, not eating, not drinking, just spreading the papers out like a map of the battlefield I was about to enter. A battlefield with no guns, no fire, but cuts deeper than any blade. Each line was a link, and now I saw the whole web, thread by thread, tangled, complex, but with a center. And the center was Damon. He'd built a hidden financial system so sophisticated an average person would never notice. At least 3 alias identities. One as Damon Stroud, his legal name, another as Daniel White, used for short-term loans and leased assets in another state. A third as Devin Walker, tied to a small apartment lease in Utah with scattered crypto transactions. All built on fake info, but the linked bank accounts funneled money to the same digital wallet, opened under a shell company, WealthRamp Solutions LLC, registered in Delaware with no employees, no website, nothing but a rented mailbox. The money flowed from multiple sources, some from credit cards opened under family cosigner status I never signed for, some from a secondary card on Emily's main bank account, controlled by Damon via an app, the rest from anonymous crypto app transactions based overseas. I had Hank trace it all, and he sent me a money flow chart. That's when I saw the danger. Damon wasn't just lying to Emily. He was preparing to bolt. He was collecting funds, small amounts, hidden as risky investments Emily thought were for their shared future. One entry in the report chilled me. A life insurance policy in my name, beneficiary, Lauren Whitaker, opened online 6 months ago, with my personal details exact to the digit. I never signed, never knew, never consented. But the application copy had a signature eerily close, near perfect. Someone forged it, maybe with AI, maybe by hand, and Damon was the only one with enough data to pull it off. If I died in an unexplained accident, Lauren would get $250,000, part of the plan. I stood, went to the study, opened the safe, and took out the third envelope, one I hadn't touched since compiling it. Inside were screenshots of money transfers, PDFs printed from emails Damon sent to his secret dating account, and photos of him with Lauren at Huntington Beach, shoulder to shoulder, smiling like nothing else existed. Taken by a hidden camera I'd hired a PI to plant in a rental car. I sealed the envelope, labeled it L2. One copy would go to the lawyer, one I'd keep, one I'd give to Emily at the right time. Not now. I wanted to see more. I wanted to know, after all these layers of deceit, how far Damon would go. That week he acted strange. Not overly kind anymore. Defensive silence. He didn't ask me anything. Didn't touch the kitchen. Didn't mention finances. Every night after dinner he retreated to his room, locked the door. I heard steady typing, whispered calls. I'd planted a small recorder in the chair's backrest, seam in the study. I didn't need to eavesdrop on everything. Just a few key phrases. Wednesday night, I got them. I'll be done soon. Just one more week. She suspects nothing. Yeah, no, The old man's starting to look at me funny, but he's got no proof. Trust me, after this getaway, we're set. We'll have enough. Getaway. Emily had told me that morning Damon suggested a short trip for the holiday weekend, 3 days in Aspen, to relax. But now I understood. He wasn't planning to relax. He was planning to disappear. I called Hank that night, told him to rush the latest documents to my lawyer. I also scheduled a meeting with Emily for Saturday afternoon, under the pretense of wanting to talk privately. No Damon. She agreed happily. She had no idea. And Damon, in the final days of the financial web he'd so carefully spun, didn't realize he was the fly caught in it. Thrashing harder only brought the end closer. I pulled the study window curtains, sat in my chair, opened the laptop, and began writing the final list. Every sum of money, every account, every lie, every knot in the web. When Emily reads these lines, she'll understand. Love is the easiest thing to manipulate. But once awakened, it can destroy everything in a single blow. And Damon, he was never prepared for that. I chose a calm, windless afternoon to talk to Emily. Not the weekend as planned. I changed my mind. I didn't want to wait any longer. Not because I feared Damon would act first, but because I was tired of pretending everything was fine. And I believed if there was any hope for my daughter to escape before it all collapsed, that moment was now. I called her to the back porch where the old maples were turning honey gold, their leaves falling in the pale, slanting autumn light of Colorado. I sat in Maria's old rocking chair, Emily across from me, hands clasped, eyes waiting for something serious. "Dad?" she started. "Is something wrong?" I didn't answer right away. I looked into her eyes, searching for the gaze of the little girl who held my hand at her mother's funeral without shedding a tear. That strong, calm look, hiding unspoken hurt. And I knew that girl was still there. "Do you trust me?" I asked, voice steady. Emily frowned. "Why would you ask that? Just if I tell you something hard to accept, would you believe I'm doing it to protect you, not out of malice?" She was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I trust you." I took a deep breath. "Have you ever caught Damon lying?" The question made the air sink as if the whole porch dipped for a beat. Emily looked at me longer than usual. "What are you talking about?" "Last night," I said, "I heard Damon on the phone. He thought I was asleep. He said he'd be done soon, that she suspects nothing. Do you know who she is?" Emily leaned back slightly. "You're spying on Damon?" I didn't answer directly. I just looked at her. And in that brief moment, I saw her eyes waver. Not because I was lying, because she knew I was telling the truth. "I've seen things," Emily whispered. "Deleted texts, late-night calls, bank transactions I didn't understand. And you never asked?" What if I asked, and the answer was something I didn't want to hear? I sat still. The leaves rustled against each other, the sound of the changing season, and perhaps of something unraveling. "I have proof," I said after a pause. "Proof of what Damon's done. Accounts in other names, shady transactions, and a woman named Lauren." Emily flinched. The name wasn't unfamiliar. I saw recognition in her eyes, a recognition long denied, now named. "I was going to show you everything," I continued, "but not today. Today I just need you to answer one thing." Emily looked at me, lips pressed tight. "If you knew for sure Damon betrayed you, used your trust, and was planning to leave you, what would you do?" She didn't answer right away. She turned away, eyes on the wooden fence where Maria once planted lavender pots, now just withered stems. "I don't know," she said, voice choked. "I thought I was strong, but I'm scared. Scared to admit I was wrong. Scared it's all a misunderstanding, and if I confront him, I'll ruin everything." I nodded. "I understand. I was scared like that when your mom got sick and insisted it was just a cold." I didn't speak up, and I lost her forever. Emily turned back, eyes red. "I don't want to lose anyone else," she whispered. "There are things you can't keep by staying," I said. "Sometimes walking away is how you keep yourself." We sat quietly for a long time. I didn't push. I let her face the truth at her own pace. Before standing, I said one last thing. "If you ever want the whole truth, tell me to open the safe." Then I walked inside, leaving Emily alone in the fading golden afternoon. Not because I was cold, but because I knew awakening doesn't come from words. It comes from a silence too heavy to bear. And Emily, my daughter, was nearing that threshold. I entered the study the next morning as usual, but this time with absolute calm. The calm of someone who's accepted the battle is coming, and all that's left is preparation. I wasn't angry at Damon anymore. The anger had passed like a long fever. Now there was only a clear, lucid feeling. I had to do what was right, protect Emily, bring everything to light, not with screams but with legal, controlled, irreversible steps. I opened the safe, took out the marked file, the L2 set, complete evidence of Damon's shady dealings, bank accounts, forged insurance papers, photos of him with Lauren. I printed another copy, marked L3. This one wouldn't go in the safe. It would go to my lawyer. I called Stephen Brody, my and Maria's old attorney from when we redrafted our wills in 2013. Stephen didn't ask much over the phone, just told me to come to his office the next morning. When I arrived, he was waiting with a hot espresso and a neutral look. I set the file on his desk, saying briefly, I need an asset protection order, freezing all transfers from any joint accounts Emily's on. I also need to update my will, transferring all inheritance to Emily, with Damon having no access under any circumstances. Stephen nodded. And if Damon pushes back? I want you ready to hand this copy to the police if I disappear, or if anything unusual happens to Emily. We signed the necessary papers. I authorized a special condition. If I didn't check in weekly by phone, Stephen would act automatically. After leaving his office, I drove to an electronics store in Aurora. I bought a small GPS tracker to attach under Damon's car, one that syncs live to my phone. I also got a mini camera disguised as a phone charger for the living room outlet. I was done playing defense. I was counterattacking. That evening, while Damon showered, I went to the yard, slid under his SUV, and attached the tracker. My hands trembled slightly from the cold, but I'd never been surer. An hour later, my phone showed, device active, car location at my house. Perfect. Every night after, I logged his movements, where he went, how long, who he met. On late nights, I cross-checked locations, once near Union Federal Bank, once at a suburban Denver apartment complex where Lauren had appeared in photos. He thought he was hidden, but it was all being recorded. Every line, every timestamp, every map. Meanwhile, Emily lived in a hazy space, sensing something wrong, but not yet naming it. She smiled less, stared into the distance more. I knew the time to expose Damon was near, and then he slipped. One Thursday afternoon, I saw him take a stack of papers from my study. I let him. It was a planted printout of the fake insurance contract, with a slightly off signature, enough to prove forgery if he submitted it anywhere. He tucked it into his briefcase, hurried to his car. The GPS pinged. He went to the bank. I called Stephen immediately. He's prepping to file something, likely insurance-related. Don't worry, Stephen said. I'll send a hold order to the 3 banks linked to him. That evening, I sat in the living room, TV light flickering on my face and Damon's, each on opposite ends of the sofa. Emily went to bed early. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock's second hand. You okay, Dad? Damon asked, voice smooth. Fine, I replied, eyes on the screen. It's almost the end. He turned. End of what? I smiled. The end of a play where everyone thinks they're the director. He gave an awkward laugh, turned back to the TV, but I knew his heart was racing. His hand gripped the sofa fabric lightly, and I just sat there, silent, like the final witness to a collapse he'd built with every brick of deceit. A collapse I was readying the stage for. Emily arrived 15 minutes late to our meeting. She walked into the small cafe on Southbridge, coat draped over her arm, eyes red as if she'd just cried or wrestled with herself to the last second. I'd been there nearly half an hour, my coffee barely touched, cold since I arrived. I didn't blame her. I thought she might not show, but she did, and that alone told me she was ready. Sorry, she said, sitting across from me. Work was chaotic this afternoon. I nodded. Didn't lie and say I believed her. Didn't deny it. Just nodded. I pulled a pale yellow envelope from my bag. Nothing written on it but a single handwritten line. Only open when you're ready for the truth. I placed it on the table, slid it toward her. Emily stared at it like it might burst into flames. I didn't rush her. If you're not ready, I can take it back, I said. She shook her head, hesitated a few seconds, then picked it up, opened it slowly, pulled out the papers, and started reading. I watched her face as each layer of truth tore through the velvet curtain she'd clung to for 3 years. Her eyes widened, lips trembled, throat swallowed as if the words stabbed her chest. First, the bank transaction photos, accounts she never knew Damon had. Large sums withdrawn for no clear reason. Next, the fake insurance contract with my signature, which I never signed. Emily looked up, face pale. This signature, I never signed it, I said. Brief. She nodded, almost mechanically, and kept reading. The next page was copies of texts Damon sent to Lauren, the woman Emily once suspected when her name popped up on his phone. Dismissed by a smooth lie. Old coworker, babe, don't be jealous. And then the photos. Emily stared at one of Damon and Lauren embracing outside a hotel. Another. Them kissing in a car. The last, Damon withdrawing cash from an ATM tied to her account. I didn't speak. I let the truth do its work. Each cut, each crack inside Emily. And then the emptiness of realizing it wasn't an accident. It was a plan. A calculated, systematic plan. How long? Emily's voice was small. From the start, I replied. He knew you were trusting, and he knew I had assets. She gave a bitter laugh. I suspected, Dad, but I thought if I doubted the man I loved, maybe I was the one with the problem. You're not the problem, I said. You hoped he was as good as you wanted him to be. Emily covered her face with both hands. Still for nearly a minute. I didn't touch her shoulder. Didn't comfort. I let her peel off the mask she'd worn for 3 years. The mask of a warm, stable, kind marriage. Finally, she looked up, eyes red, voice hoarse. Can you give me everything? The originals? All of it, I nodded. It's ready at Stephen Brody's office. My lawyer. You just sign, and he'll hand it over. I'm getting a divorce, she said, no tremor in her voice. I won't let him do this to me another day. I looked at her, my daughter, cheeks still wet, but her eyes different. No more fear, no more doubt, just resolve. I wonder, I said softly, what you'd have done if you never opened that envelope. Emily pressed her lips. I'd probably be in Aspen with him, thinking I was on a happy getaway. We stayed at the cafe a while longer. Emily didn't cry again. She just sat, as if rewriting her life's chapters in her head. That evening, she came home before Damon. I didn't ask what she'd say. I just handed her the safe's key. There's one more thing in there, I said. A letter from your mom for her daughter, in case I'm gone. Emily gripped the key, nodded. Dad, thank you for not letting me live in lies any longer. She went upstairs. I sat in the living room, dim light casting over the familiar space. When Damon came home, he saw me sitting there, still as stone. Not sleeping, Dad? He asked, setting his car keys on the table. No, I replied, not looking at him. Tonight I want to stay up to hear a door close. He froze. His eyes narrowed. What door? I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because less than 30 minutes later from upstairs came raised voices. Emily's voice, clear, firm, angry. You lied to me. For 3 years it was all fake. Damon's voice, flustered, panicked. What are you talking about? Who put that in your head? You did. The photos, the transactions, Lauren, Aspen, the life insurance, every single thing. I heard footsteps, a shout, then a slap, not violent. The desperate sound of someone who'd lost the power they thought was permanent. The door slammed open. Damon ran downstairs, face pale. Dad, he yelled. What the hell did you tell her? I looked straight into his eyes. Calm, unblinking. I didn't tell her anything, I replied. I just let her read. He wanted to say more but stopped. He knew. He'd lost. Nothing left to hold. No one left to convince. Emily came downstairs, pulling a suitcase. Each step was a cut through the illusion Damon had built. Get out, she said, before I call the police. He stood for another second, then left. When the door closed behind him, the click was soft as a keystroke. But to me and to Emily, it was the clearest sound of freedom. A freedom reclaimed by truth, and no one could take it away. Damon didn't come back that day, or the next. No texts, no apology calls, no excuses like men often give when exposed. He retreated silently, as if he'd never existed, as if 3 years of marriage were a thin shell shattered beyond holding any piece of reality. Emily didn't cry anymore. She didn't curse, didn't break things, didn't ask me what to do next. The next morning she sat at the dining table, hair tied back, wearing the white blouse Maria bought her for her birthday 2 years ago, holding a black coffee, no sugar, like her college days. She looked at me, calmly said, I'll work as usual. At noon I'll stop by the lawyers to sign the papers. Tonight I want to cook dinner myself. I just nodded. Nothing more needed saying. All that day I didn't see Damon around the house, but his car's GPS was still active. At noon it pinged at a small hotel parking lot on the west outskirts. He didn't leave until evening. Maybe he was waiting for Emily to reach out. Maybe he believed in a Hollywood-style reconciliation, but Emily gave him no such chance. When she returned late afternoon, she had a file folder in hand. Signed, she said, setting it on the table. Stephen will file it with the court tomorrow. If Damon wants to contest, he has 10 days. But Stephen says guys like him either ghost or try to settle out of court to minimize damage. I asked softly, do you want him to lose everything? Emily shook her head. No need. I just want back what I lost. 3 years of trust, 3 years of lies. I'm not asking for compensation. I just want it over. That night's dinner was beef soup and garlic bread. The smell reminded me of when Maria was alive, when we were still a full family. Emily played the jazz record I liked, poured a small glass of wine, and invited me to eat. No one mentioned Damon. No one revisited what happened. We just sat, quietly sharing the first peaceful moment in months of tension. 2 days later, Damon called. Not me, Emily. I was in the backyard, under the maple's shade, when she stepped out, phone to her ear, face expressionless. She said 4 sentences. I signed the papers. I don't need explanations. No, you don't need to see my dad. I wish you luck. Then she hung up. No hesitation, no trembling. No more mentioning him, Emily said, pocketing the phone. I don't want Damon to be what's left in my life. I knew it wasn't truly over. Divorce is a legal process, but ending a relationship is a mental journey. No matter how strong, Emily would need time. But I believed she'd get through, because for the first time in 3 years, I saw light in her eyes. Not the light of illusion, but of someone stepping out of darkness. The next week, we reorganized the house. Emily cleared Damon's bedroom. Everything he left, clothes, books, personal items, was packed neatly into 2 cardboard boxes, placed by the front door. No one asked if he'd come for them. and he didn't. I called the bank, revoked all access to joint accounts. Stephen filed a request to temporarily freeze Damon's assets pending court review. An additional protection clause was attached. Evidence of the forged life insurance signature. An independent investigation was opened. Hank Lerner, my old audit friend, emailed that Damon had been flagged by 2 out-of-state financial firms for false credit profiles. If that case was reactivated in court, he could face criminal charges. I forwarded everything to Stephen. He said one thing: let the law handle the rest. One evening, as Emily worked on her laptop in the kitchen, I opened the safe again, not to check, not to add documents, but to take out the one thing left, Maria's wedding ring. I wiped it clean with a soft cloth, placed it neatly on the desk. A symbol of devotion, a reminder of loyalty, and the end of an old chapter. The next morning I saw Emily holding the ring. She didn't ask anything, just smiled faintly, placed it in a small velvet-lined box, and tucked it into a drawer. I want to keep it, she said, not to remember marriage, but to remember Mom, and something real. I didn't ask if she still believed in love. The question was too soon, and maybe unnecessary. What I needed to know was that Emily chose not to let pain define the rest of her life. 3 days later, Damon sent a short email. I won't contest. Thanks for everything. No apology, no explanation, no pleading. Just a cold surrender, the same way he entered Emily's life. Not real, not deep, and not enough to last. A week later, the court approved the divorce. No need for a hearing, no disputes. Everything was divided per the agreement my lawyer drafted. Damon got nothing. No money, no assets, not a single keepsake photo. When Emily got the final confirmation, she held the decree, read it once, then tore it to pieces. She didn't cry, didn't shake, didn't regret. It's really over now, she said. I feel lighter than I've breathed in 3 years. I hugged her. For the first time since Maria's death, I felt this house could be a place to start again. Not because Damon was gone, because Emily was back, whole and free. A week after the court's final ruling, the house fell into a strange quiet. Not the heavy silence of the past months, when Damon's every step creaked with suspicion. Not the taut silence of a string waiting to snap, but a serene silence, like after a big storm. The branches that don't break sprout anew. Emily stayed with me, for now, at least. She woke earlier, cooked, worked, even brought small flower pots to place around the porch. Something she'd neglected since Damon drained her time and mind. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. Some father-daughter bonds don't need reassurance or affirmation. Just existing together at the right time is enough. I kept tracking Damon's GPS for a few more days, more out of habit than concern. He moved little, stayed at the same hotel, withdrawing cash regularly from a new alias account, avoiding any address tied to legal records. He was trying to vanish. But life doesn't grant men like Damon that privilege forever. The second week post-divorce, I received an express package from the lawyer's office. Inside was a notice from a federal investigation. Damon was under financial surveillance for a series of illicit interstate money transfers, using fake identities and shell companies. No arrest yet, but a case was open. A quiet investigation had begun, and I just had to wait. No need for revenge, no need for confrontation. The law would do the rest. That evening, I sat on the back porch in Maria's rocking chair. Early winter, not too cold, but enough for an extra sweater. Light from the house spilled through the glass, catching the small photo Emily had placed back on the living room shelf. Her wedding picture. Simple wooden frame, no longer on the wall. Just set quietly, face down, like a farewell. I thought about everything. The sleepless nights, Damon's dripping questions, footsteps in the dark, the safe, the layers of documents, the deliberate silence, and finally Emily's eyes when she read the truth. It was all a chain of dominoes set to fall with one light touch. But that touch didn't come from me. It came from Damon, in his unchecked greed. The door opened behind me. Emily stepped out, wrapped in a shawl, holding a steaming tea. Still up, Dad? Yeah. She sat in the chair beside me, handed me a tea. Tomorrow, I'm thinking of clearing out the storage room. It's time we made space for new things. I nodded. How long are you staying? I don't know, she exhaled. But I know one thing. I don't need to run anymore, and I don't need someone beside me to feel complete. I smiled, not out of joy, out of relief. Maria, if alive, would have smiled too. I'm heading to bed, Emily said, standing. Before going inside, she turned back. Thanks, Dad, for saying nothing, but saying everything. I stayed alone a while, then stood, went to the study, opened the safe one last time. Not to store anything, not to retrieve evidence. No one left to accuse, no one left to hide from. Inside was just one thing, Emily's wedding photo, folded in quarters, edges creased in a thin plastic sleeve. I took it out, unfolded it, looked at it for a long time. In the photo, Damon smiled brightly, holding my daughter's hand as they left the church. Emily wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her mom, Maria, in the front row, face radiant. I'd never noticed that before. I flipped the photo over. In faint blue ink, Maria had written a short line. "Everything will change. Just hold on to yourself." I folded the photo, placed it in a new envelope. Wrote, "Emily, open if you forget who you are." I put the envelope in the safe. Didn't lock it. The next day, I quietly called a service to remove the safe. I told them to take it away. I didn't need it anymore. What I needed to keep, I'd kept. What I needed to protect, I'd placed in worthy hands. And I, finally, was free from the burden that seemed endless. The weight of guarding something rotten from within. That evening, Emily stepped into the study, saw the empty space where the safe had been. "You got rid of the safe?" she asked. "Yeah. Anything left in it?" I shook my head. "No, don't need it anymore." She nodded, didn't ask more. But before leaving, she turned, said softly as a breeze, "You know, Dad, this hurt like hell. But because of it, I see how strong I am, and how strong you are." I didn't reply. I just watched her silhouette fade behind the door. Silence. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of secrets, but the silence that comes after everything's been said, every truth revealed, every memory packed and put away, the silence of an ending. And sometimes, that's the greatest peace a person can claim after a lifetime of loss. The story my daughter's husband tried to break into my safe, but what he found ended his marriage, is not just a family tragedy, but a mirror reflecting realities in modern American society, where trust can be exploited, where family bonds can be manipulated for personal gain, and where individuals must learn to protect themselves within their own homes. In the story, the father is not just the protagonist, but a symbol of quiet vigilance. He doesn't confront Damon with anger or violence, but chooses to gather evidence, observe silently, and wait patiently for the truth to speak. This is a vital lesson for many Americans today. In a society where relationships can be swayed by finance, law, and deceit, emotions shouldn't be the only weapon. His use of legal tools like lawyers, surveillance devices, and asset protection reflects the proactive clarity needed as family-based financial scams rise. On the other hand, Emily, the daughter, represents many modern American women, accomplished, independent, but vulnerable to misplaced trust. Through her courage to face the truth and divorce not out of hatred but for self-liberation, the story offers clear advice. Don't ignore warning signs in a relationship, just to cling to fleeting stability. In today's world where people like Damon exist in real life and digital spaces, vigilance, financial literacy, and the courage to leave toxic relationships aren't weakness, they're profound strength. If this story stirred something in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to catch more stories about truth, trust, and what's hidden in the safest seeming homes. Thanks for sticking with us to the end. See you in the next video, where more secrets are uncovered through silence and patience.